Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the wild, weird, and wacky world of the Word. Yeah, wild, weird, and wacky because sometimes we come upon parts of the Scripture that really make us shake our heads and scratch our heads and try to figure out exactly what's going on here. And we have that going on in our Scripture passages for this coming Sunday. One of those, Isaiah, the 7th chapter, and the other, the 1st chapter of Matthew. So, what is it exactly that we're looking at? We're looking at these verses. Now, context is Isaiah is speaking to the king of Judah, Ahaz, and saying, don't get involved with that king from Assyria because he's a bad dude. And if you try to cut a deal with him, he's going to come back and just nail you, which is exactly what happens because Ahaz doesn't listen to Isaiah. But during the course of the conversation, Isaiah had said, look, God's going to give you a sign. Just ask for any kind of a sign and he'll do it. Ahaz becomes super religious at this point, saying, hey, I'm not going to test the Lord my God. We're not supposed to do that. And Isaiah says, oh, for heaven's sakes, look, if you're not going to ask for a sign, God's going to give you one anyhow. And this is the sign. The young woman is with child, and shall bear a son, and shall name him Emmanuel. Okay? So, and that means God with us. That's the exact translation of Emmanuel. God is with us. All right, so what's going on with this passage? Well, it all centers around the word the young woman. Now listen, it says the young woman. Isaiah is pointing at somebody. It's someone that both he and Ahaz knows who he's talking about. He's not saying a young woman. He's saying, hey, the young woman. She's going to bear a son. We're going to call him Emmanuel. And that means God is with us. Okay. Well, Ahaz didn't want to hear that. So he ignored that and he ends up getting into a lot of trouble. And the country is destroyed by Assyria. A young woman. Okay, here's where the issue comes in. It's Amal in Hebrew. Young woman. That's exactly what it means. A young woman of marrying age. She's not married yet. It doesn't mean virgin. Now, where do we get virgin from? Well, in the New Testament, when we get into Matthew, we have Matthew quoting, saying a virgin will be with child, and they will call him Emmanuel. Wait a minute. I thought it wasn't virgin. Well, you see, somewhere around the 3rd century BC, the whole Old Testament was translated into the Greek. And when it was translated into the Greek from the original Hebrew, Amal became Parthenos, which in the Greek means virgin. Doesn't exactly mean virgin in the way you and I consider the word virgin this day. It means pretty much the same thing, a young woman of marrying age. In other words, she hasn't been married before. It has no sexual connotations whatsoever. But because of the word virgin, we put the sexual connotations in it. Now, here's the deal. When Matthew pulls that out, Matthew, all through his gospel, is quoting from Old Testament scriptures, and this was one of them, because it's not because of the status of the young woman, it's because of the child's name. And we don't focus on that. We focus on the fact, well, did Mary have sexual relations? No, she didn't. And we forget all about God is with us. You see how crazy this gets? And so we start having all these fights over, was Mary truly a virgin in the sense that we think of a virgin, or wasn't she? Well, Matthew makes it pretty clear that she was. Because what does he tell Joseph, who thinks that Mary has cheated on him before they had their marriage consummated? He wants to dismiss her, which is the kind word for divorce. That would probably be a better word. And it's the kind of word that would have been used in Matthew's time, divorce. So he's going to divorce her. And that's when the angel shows up and says, hey, no, don't do it. Because you see, what Mary's got going on inside of her, that was created by God. Yeah, Why can we say that was created by God and had its beginnings in God? Because God did it. There's no human being was involved in this. God did it. Mary is the God bearer, but this is all God's work. And we have that because when we look at the genealogy that comes just before this in the Gospel of Matthew, what does it say? It says the Genesis of Jesus. The Genesis of Jesus? He could have used a lot of different words talking about the birth of Jesus and talking about a genealogy. No, he uses the exact same word that's used in the book of Genesis. Beginnings. This is the beginnings. This is how it all happened. It was a God thing. How was the world created? It was created out of nothing. It was God's Spirit that did it. It's God's Spirit that's doing this thing in Mary. There's really no super heavy emphasis, even for Matthew, on it being a virgin birth. Although he does make it clear to Joseph, hey, you don't divorce her because she was messing around. No, this is God doing his thing in her life and now in yours. And guess what, Joe? You're going to call this your son. When Joseph named him Jesus, that was a legal thing that was done back and then. The father named the son. And once that happened, that's as good as saying, this is my son. So Joseph took a big step of faith. So the emphasis in the story, this one in particular, is on Joseph at this point. Joseph, against all odds, moving forward and taking Jesus as his son. Even though he's sitting there scratching his head on how can such a thing happen. He put his faith and his trust in God that it was so. So instead of us beating up on each other over the exact meaning of this word, is it young woman? Is it a woman of marrying age? Is it someone who's had no sexual relationships? He is a virgin in the sense that we think a virgin. Forget it. We'll never get to the bottom of that issue because of the translation things that are going on between the Old Testament and the New Testament, between the Hebrew text and the Greek text. But for the people who are writing the New Testament, think about this. Where else do you see talk about the virgin birth? Where else do you really see any talk of any birth of Jesus? You only see it in Matthew and in Luke, and really, they don't make a big deal out of it. What's important for them is the life and ministry and the death and resurrection of Jesus. And even when you look in the Apostle Paul, where does he mention the virgin birth? Like nowhere. How about all the other sermons that are written as epistles in our New Testament? Where do they mention the virgin birth? Like nowhere. It's not a thing for them. Why should it be a thing for us? Let's look at what Matthew was saying when he pulled that verse out, that he shall be called Emmanuel. Oh, and that's one other thing. Some people get a little confused because in the Old Testament, it's often with an I, Emmanuel. What does it mean, Emmanuel? Again, that's the transliteration. From the Hebrew is Emmanuel with an I, and from the Greek, it's Emmanuel with an E. Wild, weird, and wacky. That's what it's all about today, folks. But remember, God is with us. That's what's important. Blessings be with you.